Tina Glandian, the U.S. Attorney for Andrew and Tristan Tate. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us today. I know you are out there in Romania.
Hi, Josh. Yes, I'm in Bucharest as we speak.
So first off, just explain to me what happened in the most recent court hearing. I know the hope was, of course, that your clients would not be behind bars at this point. So just kind of explain to me what happened during that hearing.
Sure. We were in court yesterday morning. The defense put on extensive arguments. They argued for close to 2 hours about the weakness of the prosecution's case, the lack of evidence. It's a closed hearing, so I can't actually get into the specifics of what was argued in that proceeding. But at the end of the hearing, there was no conclusion. We were told that we will have an order later in the day. And then several hours later, we heard that unfortunately the court had denied the appeal and the brothers will continue to be detained until February 27th.
And my understanding is that at this point, they have not been formally charged with anything. Is that correct?
That's correct. So there is only a criminal investigation that's ongoing. I know there's some confusion, but that's the status of the proceedings right now. No criminal. This investigation started back in April of 2022. Now we're in February, so it's been 10 months. They still have not been charged. This is what's known here as a preventative detention.
Your thoughts on the way that this case is being handled there in Romania? Because as we mentioned, no charges have been filed, but they are still in custody.
Yes, of course, as a U.S. attorney, this for me it's very un-American. Our process does not allow this in the U.S. In most jurisdictions, they have 48 hours to either charge or release somebody who's in custody. Here, it's a little bit different. They can apply for what initially was a 24-hour hold. Then they were able to apply for a 30-day extension of that, and they get to repeat that process up to 180 days. I think it's unjust. I think at this point, they've been in custody for over 30 days in unsanitary, inhumane conditions in a Romanian jail cell. They are U.S. citizens, and to me, it's fundamentally unfair. I think it flies in the face of international human rights law that they are not being released. This is the harshest form of punishment a government can impose, and all of this is before charges have been filed.
And I don't know if you can go into detail about this, but what is the jail like there that they're in Romania? Because you said it's not exactly the best conditions. We're not talking about necessarily a jail in the U.S. that is under certain, I guess you could say, standards when it comes to what the conditions have to be.
Sure. So I went to the jail myself. I was hoping to meet the brothers in custody, see it for myself firsthand, and talk to them about their experiences. Unfortunately, I was denied access to them in jail. And to be clear, I went there with my Romanian defense team, and we had the proper paperwork. We had my credentials showing I'm a U.S. attorney and everything else, and I was denied access, which again, I think is a huge issue. They are U.S. citizens. They have a need to discuss certain matters with their U.S. counsel, things that their Romanian counsel can't advise them on. And, again, they've been detained for over 30 days. They have no access to their attorneys, even at this point, the U.S. attorneys. And so that was very disappointing. So unfortunately, I didn't get to see the conditions as I had hoped in person. But from what I understand, again, it's not a humane situation they're in. And one of the four, in this investigation, they're the Tate brothers and two women that were all detained as part of the same investigation. And one of those women was hospitalized yesterday. I can't really go into detail about that, but we're deeply concerned about them being held inside. Again, you hear horror stories sometimes of things that happen while people are in pretrial detention, people who oftentimes are then cleared and released or should be released. And, sometimes they don't even make it out. So we're deeply concerned.
And that leads to the question about their mental health and things of that nature when you're inside a facility like that, especially when you're used to a different standard of living. I don't know if you have been able to talk to them to figure out if they are okay, if they're mentally okay in that jail.
I've had a chance to speak with them after the court proceeding, but that was in court. It was brief. They are strong and they're resilient and they are holding up, but it's very difficult. And yes, of course, it's causing them extreme stress and anguish. And it's not the best mental state for them right now, but they're really strong and they're holding up.
I know you can't speak too much to this because obviously there is, client attorney privilege and that sort of thing. But what have they told you about this investigation as far as their guilt, not guilt? I would imagine they're telling you they are in no way involved in any sort of human trafficking operation or anything like that.
As you said, I can't get into too many details, but I think what I would say is this investigation again started in April, it's February, and they haven't even been charged. And without getting into the facts, because again, these proceedings have been kept closed, but there is obviously certain information out in the public domain that really casts serious doubts on what the evidence is. And I think the fact that, again, in the 10-month period, they have not been charged with any crimes really speaks volumes.
There's no question here. Andrew Tate is a very divisive figure. A lot of people know who he is. He has millions of followers on Twitter, other social media platforms. Do you think his divisive nature and just how well known he is playing a role in any part of this case?
Absolutely. I think to us at this point, it seems like they're being detained while police are trying to come up with evidence to continue to hold them, because if there was evidence, I think they would be charged at this point. So I think a lot of his public commentary is really being used against him. And we think there's outside pressures on the proceedings in question.
You've represented a lot of, high profile celebrities. Like, do you think that celebrities are treated differently in situations like this than, your average Joe?
Absolutely. I think there's a misconception sometimes that celebrities get what they call celebrity justice and that somehow it's favorable treatment. In my experience, I could say it's always the opposite. I think usually when a case is high profile and there's a lot of eyes on it, people on all sides behave a little differently. And I think they're usually trying to be a little more forceful and to push things a lot harder than they would in a typical case. So unfortunately, I think when something is high profile, as this case is, they are at a disadvantage.
There are several claims. And again, social media, everything is on there. People will say just about anything. So it's hard to sometimes figure out what the truth is. But there are different comments on there that have said that Andrew Tate actually went to Romania to hide from any sort of investigation in the US. Is there any truth to that at all?
I think a lot of what Andrew Tate has said publicly is taken out of context. I think a lot of times one snippet of something he says is twisted in a way to make it sound like it's something that it's not. And I think in a lot of his long form interviews, he explains and provides context for his statements. So I think if you listen to his interviews, they'll shed a lot of light on what he actually means. And I don't think it's what's often represented in the media with a short headline.
Do you see any world in which your clients, Andrew and his brother, are actually convicted of any sort of charges here and are stuck there in Romania for a long period of time?
At this point, I have no basis to believe that, since charges haven't even been filed against them and I haven't seen any evidence. So at this point, I have no basis to believe that.
You hesitant in any way to take on this case due to, again, the divisive nature of Andrew Tate? Did that make you question it beforehand, or did you say, no, I know what's going on here, I got this?
As a criminal defense lawyer, again, it's not my place to be judging the clients that need representation. I'm here to be a voice and to make sure they get due process of law. They're treated fairly under the law. So I had no hesitation. I was troubled really by the fact that they are US citizens and they've been detained in a foreign country for such a lengthy period of time, especially with no charges even filed against them.
I know you haven't had a lot of time to talk to Andrew, but what is your impression of what kind of guy we're talking about with Andrew Tate?
All I can speak to is how my interactions have been with Andrew Tate, and he's been nothing but respectful. And I think people need to not think about this as the Tate brothers. I think people need to think, what if this was my brother or my son or my friend in a foreign country, and they were being held in a jail there and they had not been charged with any crimes? How would I feel about that? Again, people need to just put aside their personal feelings and look at the issue. And I think when you look at it through that lens, everybody will agree they need to be released and sent home.
What comes next?
So we are meeting with the Romanian defense team later today, and we are going to do everything we can to take the next appropriate steps to pursue getting them out of custody. And we'll have a statement later as to what that specifically will entail.